This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. From the big plays to life's everyday moments, see it all in sharp focus with LASIK at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop Lasix.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya, Josh McQuiston in Houston HQ. Happy Friday to you, Friday, June 20th. A big weekend coming up in Norman with the barbecue weekend, the recruiting weekend. We will hit on everything as they get into that. But obviously, Game 6 in Indianapolis did not go well last night. So we are here today. If you joined us yesterday on the program, spirits were high. Spirits were extremely high. A little bit lower today.
It's Kerry's fault.
That's right. There was a lot of people in my mentions last night blaming the great Kerry Burdock for the Thunder's performance on Thursday in Indianapolis. He said, I can't even repeat that. I think we'd get kicked off YouTube for all the things that I've said that have been out of line. What Kerry just said in our ear probably wouldn't pass the sniff test. All right. Big news in the OU recruiting world, and I think that it was kind of one of those moments, even in the low point of Thursday night, that was like, of course, this is going to drop now. But what we had talked about over the it feels like, Josh, last couple months came to fruition on Thursday evening. Jaden O'Neal decommits from Oklahoma. This comes on, I guess, the heels of a trip to Norman when he worked out. We talked about it last week. And then Monday, he went out to Tallahassee for an official visit with Florida State. But long story short, Jaden O'Neal now out of the equation for Oklahoma in 2026 following his decommitment on Thursday night.
Yeah, guys, we talked about this on Monday, and I think we talked about just the quarterback situation in general, and I think I said something along the lines of, I feel like what we've been talking about for months is finally about to happen. Like, I feel like we're all kind of trending in the direction. Now, at the time, I still thought Jaden O'Neal would take his official visit. I kind of thought he'd do that this weekend, and then, you know, I don't know if some honest conversations were going to happen or what it was, but it sounds like maybe he and Oklahoma just decided to do that a little early. They were like, let's clear the air. Let's get everything out there. And I think that's what's happened over the last 48 hours or so. And they've just kind of said, you know, this is, I think Oklahoma is looking in a different direction. I think Jaden O'Neal wants to look in a different direction where he feels, you know, he's talked about it in multiple interviews and even in his announcement last night, you know, wanted to feel wanted and, you know, just, I think appreciated, you know, kind of that sort of thing. And guys, I mean, a lot of times when players say stuff like that, I'm like, that's, you know, that feels a little much. I think it's valid in this one. Like, I think he picked up that Oklahoma had their focus elsewhere. And guys, I don't blame Oklahoma for that. I think that's just the way this worked out, and that's kind of where things stood.
Josh, do you think there's probably some hard feelings about the way this went down, especially, I mean, I know that you've kind of said that you didn't like the way OU handled this. Do you think there's probably some hard feelings between the two sides?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I don't know about so much from OU's side because, like, I don't know what your objection would be to Jaden O'Neal. Like, I don't know what he's done to upset Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know, he committed. Guys, I mean, like, he took that one trip way back right after Oklahoma let go of Seth Luttrell to Colorado. Mm-hmm. And with that exception, I don't think anything, like, he didn't really do anything other than, what I think Oklahoma was trying to get him to do the whole time, which is, hey, you know, look around, see if there's other options out there, guys. I think we had, I feel like we did more than hint at it, that, you know, Oklahoma's focus was elsewhere. And, you know, you can think that's right or wrong or whatever. That's fine. But like we said, I mean, guys, we did that show, probably 2 months ago, 3 months ago maybe, where we were just like, just put it all out there. Like, just everybody just be direct, say what's real, and this is going to be a lot less painless. And instead, we went through this for 2 or 3 months, which is great for our YouTube show. Like, I'm not, like, mad about it from a business perspective, but I don't really understand how OU could be frustrated about things. I certainly would understand if the O'Neals felt like, you know, maybe this thing could have been handled a little cleaner.
Sure. And the weirdness now with him being at Mustang High School, you know, possibly, I know there's been some predictions coming in for Florida State coming out of that official visit weekend, and that kind of shifts everything to this weekend. And obviously, Bowe Bentley, coming off of his visit to Norman just a couple weeks ago, had an exceptional, it looked like exceptional camp season out in Los Angeles at the Elite 11. Just in terms of Bowe Bentley, I know that you put some stuff up on the Crimson Corner on Friday morning, Josh. This thing seems to be coming together rather quickly, though. as the barbecue weekend comes, and it sounds like Bowe Bentley, there's an expectation that he's going to be in Norman this weekend, which would obviously be good news for Ben Arbuckle and company.
Yeah, and a lot of times the note stuff, that's just me. Not the case here. This was a scoop staff effort. Everybody's checking with sources, and we've put it up on the board, so I guess I can say it here. We expect Bowe Bentley to be on campus this weekend for the Champ U barbecue, which is obviously massive news. And at the time we're recording this, there's not been any public announcement, even of his arrival, much less a commitment or anything. But if he shows up in Norman, I think we all know what direction this is, kind of what direction the wind's blowing on this. So that had been the feeling, I would say, for the last week or so. Coming out of that OU visit, you thought, okay, it went really well. But you'd kind of heard like LSU really, kind of slowed him down. Like, okay, let's just, kind of talk this through, make sure. And I think Oklahoma just didn't panic. They stayed very calm. They just stayed up to date with him. Ben Arbuckle's done a really, really good job in this relationship. And, helped again by guys like John Mateer, Jim Nagy. I mean, you name it. OU has been all hands on deck in the recruitment of Bowe Bentley. And I think fairly shortly here, it's going to pay off for him.
Josh, I was just about to ask you, when you look at the job that Oklahoma's done recruiting Bowe Bentley, how good of a job was it? Because it feels like a couple weeks ago, when he's coming off that LSU visit, there's people at LSU that thought they had him locked up. How good of a job has OU done, and how big of a win would this be for Ben Arbuckle? It'd be kind of his first win at Oklahoma.
They've done a massive job, guys. There were people, and I'm not even saying like LSU people, they were, national media that I talked to that were a little concerned he'd even make that Oklahoma visit. Like that, there was some talk of like, oh, he loved LSU. He may just pull the trigger. And now again, Bowe said he wasn't going to do that. When Carrie and I went down there, I've gone back to that several times, and he was very clear. Like, I don't want to fall into that trap. I want to take my time and talk it over with my parents and that kind of stuff. And that's, I think, what has transpired. And yeah, guys, I mean, you talk about huge recruiting wins. Like we all know what we like of Ben Arbuckle. We all know, obviously the interview, George, he did with you and Joe Jr. I mean, like, there's all these things where you're like, he's been impressive, but you go do this, the fan base, you're kind of blooded in at that point. Like, you're a real guy that I think the fans are going to kind of get behind and ride with and give you a little bit of time to let it develop, because you've shown some, if you can get the offense off the ground and now you can recruit like this, there's all the reason to believe you can be the guy at offensive coordinator.
I know we had the conversation on Wednesday on the Unofficial 40, just talking about the Elite 11 and how much stock you put into it. But by all reports, Josh, it seems like Bowe Bentley had a hell of a week out in Los Angeles, highlighted by the, I think it was the second night, and I know that you had said that you were watching. He goes 18 for 20 in the Elite 11, the Pro Day Combine type of deal. But just your thoughts on his performance, any notes coming out of that from any of the national folks that you talked about that maybe not necessarily changed their opinion on Bowe, but maybe were impressed, maybe gave them a little bit more to think about going into his senior season.
Yeah, I definitely think he did a lot to solidify where a lot of people have him. I'll be interested to see, because right now everybody outside of ESPN pretty much has him as like a top 100 type of guy.
Sure.
I would guess with ESPN and their relationship with the Elite 11 and the performance he just put together, I would guess that's only going to go up. Like, he's the number 41 guy in the country for on three, and I don't think he did anything to change that perspective. He is very much in that top 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks in the country. And, the thing I like so much about him doing so well, and we kind of talked about this the other day, guys, this is not the setting that most fits Bowe Bentley. Like, this is not the deal where you say, okay, he can show everything he's got, like we've talked about before with the guy like Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler was born for Elite 11 stuff, like the way he throws it and his accuracy and just his ability with his arm. Bowe Bentley's also incredible when the play breaks down and can do some things with his feet, and that's not going to show in a setting like this where it's all very drill-oriented and you're trying to, throw it in a bucket from 30 yards away or whatever it may be. Again, I think the Elite 11 has value, and it shows you things in as much of a vacuum as you can possibly create. So I think there are good things about the Elite 11, but the thing that you like is He clearly did well just throwing it, just, using his arm, showing what he can do with that. And again, there's a lot of chalk work they do at Elite 11, so he's also talking about processing information and those kind of things, so they liked him there as well. But when you can also add in what he can do with his feet and being the athlete that he is, again, guys, we can get into the O'Neal and Bentley thing. That's a big part of this. That's a big part of why they were so clear about him being a focus of their efforts going forward because of what he can do with his feet. So you add that to what he did out in California, and you really have something.
Josh, I know there's no commitment yet. We'll see if that happens. Seems like things are turning in the right direction. But with the expectation of Bowe being in town this weekend for a massive recruiting weekend, I think 13 official visitors. How big is that to have, possibly your next quarterback commitment in town this weekend, possibly maybe helping recruit some of these other guys?
I think it also just the optics of everything. Yeah. You lose a guy, but you also have somebody ready to go. The connection back to Norman.
They gotta close this out.
Sure, 100%. But Josh, the optics of everything that come together with Bowe Bentley, even like all the way down to, I think he's going to be on the cover of Dave Campbell's. It's a big deal to go into the state of Texas and get the top quarterback.
Well, guys, look at it here. So you're talking about not only who is coming, or, that there's the optics if you lose a quarterback, but you're also bringing in multiple wide receivers this weekend. You've got Daniel Odom, who is a good friend of Jaden O'Neal. And I think when Daniel committed, a huge part of that equation was Jaden O'Neal being committed. Well, now so Daniel, obviously Jaden's not going to be here with you, but this is Bowe. He's our guy. He just went out to California, where you're from. Daniel's going to know Elite 11. He's going to know what a big deal that is for Bowe to go out there and put on that kind of performance. So I think that's a great sign. You get to say, hey, just meet him. See what you think. Maybe you guys, maybe you can hit it off with him. And then you've got Zach Turner, you've got Craig Dandridge, you've got Jordan Clay, you've got some of OU's top wide receiver targets that get to be around this guy that's just coming off this huge performance at the Elite 11. And guys, if he were to pull the trigger while he's on campus, that's the stuff we talk about that starts oh man, okay, this guy's on board. He's a top 50 guy in the country. I'd love to go catch passes from him. And then, Devin Robinson, the offensive lineman. Oh, man, I want to play with that guy. That's how you start a little momentum and you get these big visit weekends. You need somebody to be a catalyst, and it could be interesting if Bowe Bentley's going to be that guy.
So, again, Jaden O'Neal decommits. Bowe Bentley expected to be in Norman. Obviously, this is a massive recruiting weekend with the barbecue coming up. You just mentioned a couple of the names that are going to be in town. Josh, Daniel Odom, he's one of the guys that's already in town, has already started his visit. Just in terms of the guys that are coming back, and Daniel Odom is really interesting because he does have that relationship with Jaden O'Neal. I think that there was a lot of thought that maybe that was a combo, but what are Oklahoma's thoughts in terms of keeping Daniel Odom in the boat, given the Jaden O'Neal news?
Much as I'll pat us on the back as a site for Jaden O'Neal and Bowe Bentley and this kind of playing out like we've been talking about for multiple months now, I'll be honest, Daniel Odom is not playing out the way I thought it would. I thought, like you just said, Eddie, that as soon as Jaden was gone, he was going to be out. I was not going to be at all surprised if I woke up this morning and they were like, yeah, I canceled his flight and he's not coming. And, I would have completely foreseen that. But there have been people for a month or so now being like, he really likes Emmett Jones. There's a really good relationship there. And so there was a lot of talk of, okay, maybe this is all going to happen. And now, we see that he's making the visit. Like I said, he's going to be around, presumably Bowe Bentley, if that goes the way we think it's going to go. And all these other receivers, I think it's a really interesting storyline. Again, and he fits the mold of what OU seems to now want, these big, long receivers that can work vertically.
Two other wide receivers are going to be in town this weekend making their official visits, both that we have talked about here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Craig Dandridge out of Milton, Georgia, as well as Jordan Clay, wide receiver out of James Madison down there in San Antonio, Josh. Oklahoma, their chances in closing either of these guys this weekend. I know Dandridge has a announcement set up for just a couple days from now.
Yeah, Dandridge is going to be a tough one. I would say of anybody this weekend, he's the one where I would say, the odds are probably the longest there, whether it's this weekend or going forward.
Sure.
He's a Georgia kid, has a Georgia offer. That's going to be a tough sell. It just is. But again, I know Oklahoma's really high on him. He's a guy they'd really, really like to have. Got speed. He separates very long. He's kind of that body type where you see him kind of some Elijah Thomas there, where like, okay, he can really run, but he's long. There's just stuff you like about Craig Dandridge, so I get why you'd shoot your shot. With Jordan Clay, very kind of physical, powerful. One of those guys I talk about a lot. Kind of looks like a running back playing a wide receiver in the way he's kind of thick and solidly built. But is a guy that you're not going to press him. You're not going to that's going to be a problem for you, and he can run. So I like kind of what we've talked about before. There's versatility in what they're trying to do in the wide receiver room.
Josh, how many wide receivers do you think they're going to take? I know you've said on here, I've asked you that probably a lot, but it feels like it's starting to figure itself out. Daniel Odom, like you said, already committed. I know Dallas Dickerson, I think his commitment date's June 24th.
Yeah, he just announced that, I believe, yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think Oklahoma feels like maybe they're in a good spot there. You have Jordan Clay in this weekend. Like, how do you feel like this wide receiver room is going to play out?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think you get into a situation where it may, and I know I say this sometimes, it may depend on sequencing a little bit, like who is the first couple guys, okay, now who do we have left and what, do I think OU would really say no to Craig Dandridge? No, I don't really think so. Like, I think he's a guy that if he wants to come, they'd probably make those numbers work. Some other guys we'd see. But Jaden Pettit is another guy that I think Oklahoma really wants. So we'd have to kind of see how the numbers play. And again, I'm not saying those are only the two. There's a couple others that I know they're very high on as well. But those are two that kind of stand out to me based on some of the conversations I've had. But I really I think you're looking at 4 probably here. But again, for the right guy, and considering they took 2 last year, 5's not crazy. I just think it's a matter of, do they think these guys can help early on? Because after you take 2 next year, these have to be guys who can help you, not just, that's a project, and in 2 or 3 years he's going to be a guy. I don't know if you even have that anymore. Like, I don't know if you have, especially at receiver, where guys are just going to churn and turn over and over so fast. But if you feel like you could lay in 5 guys that can legitimately help you, be it in 26 or at the latest 27, I don't know that OU says no to many of those guys.
Just as much as things are clearing up at the wide receiver position, it feels like maybe they're on the verge of the same at the defensive end position. Jake Krull coming in this weekend out of IMG, obviously been a top target for Miguel Chavis and company, as well as D'Anthony Lafayette out of Louisiana. Or, excuse me, Lake Nona, Florida, Orlando, Florida. Both those guys coming in this weekend, they're part of that official visitor group as well. Jake Krull, we'll start with him. It seems like this is a guy that Miguel Chavis and Brent Venables and the defensive staff, I feel like going all the way back to last year even, when he was, I believe, in town for maybe a camp he came in, he's been a top target for Oklahoma.
I mean, like, you talk about tailor-made for Miguel Chavis and Brent Venables. Jake Krull is that guy. He's a gym nut. He loves football. Like, I mean, he is just wired the way they want a guy to be wired. And the nice news for Oklahoma is he's really, really good. So, like, it works out kind of beautifully for them. Went to Texas last week, has made several officials. I think Oklahoma's definitely in the driver's seat here. Like, it feels like something's going to have to go wrong for this not to work out for OU. I mean, I know that's, again, kind of a jinx. There's probably OU fans yelling at me a little bit right now, but I really like how they've handled Jake Krull. I think the family really trusts Miguel Chavis. I just think there's a lot working for OU in his case. And again, he's part of D'Anthony Lafayette's interest in Oklahoma is born of Jake Krull and his connection to it, because they are good friends, both from the Orlando area. So, again, I think that's I don't think I've even told the story. I actually played Little League basketball together.
Really?
Those two playing basketball, I'm guessing that was 10 fouls were used in almost every game. Like, that's got to be the case. But yeah, so they I think they're a really interesting pairing, and if you could get Jake to, I don't think he's going to commit this week, and I think he's got an announcement, planned and those sort of things. But if you could get him on board where he's kind of helping you, maybe wink, wink, and nudge, nudge a little bit with D'Anthony Lafayette, maybe you could pull off a couple of huge steals at pass rusher in Florida.
I was going to say, Josh, I feel like we haven't talked about D'Anthony a ton. Just can you give us a quick breakdown of his game and also just where he's at in his recruitment?
Yeah, there's a lot of in-state talk with him right now. You hear some Florida. I know Miami has tried to make a run. I'm not really sure where they're at on that. Like I said, Florida's the one that I kind of hear. They're starting to get a little momentum going. They're starting to build a little bit at U of F. But what I will say is, as a player, this is where Jake Krull is like I hate to make. He's like an Ethan Downs, but like more burst, a little more length, like a little more of the stuff that you see projecting to the NFL. Lafayette has a lot of R. Mason Thomas, and I know I've made that comparison before. I don't think he's quite that twitchy, but he's also probably a little bit bigger than R. Mason was at the same point in time. So, again, I think a really good player, has some natural ability as a pass rusher. Maybe like a Danny Okoye is a decent comparison. Like, again, maybe not quite that athletic, but very good and that same kind of long arm, long-legged body type.
Stay on the defensive line because they do have a couple of interior guys coming in this weekend. Brian Harris already committed out of Mandarin High School down in Jacksonville, Florida. He's coming in. I've seen Brian Harris has been extremely active on social media trying to recruit somebody like a Bowe Bentley, as well as Taj Overton out of Owasso, Josh. And let's stick with Overton for a second because it seems like things are progressing in a really good position for Oklahoma for the services of the Owasso product.
Yeah, we've got to start with, our buddy Billy Embody, who covers Ole Miss in the On3 network, put in a prediction for Taj to Oklahoma just yesterday. Basing on some conversations I've had, I don't think that's an accident. I think Ole Miss kind of came away with the impression that Taj is what we've talked about, very, very high on Oklahoma for a long time now. I don't know of a decision date that Taj has set, and so if you told me he was a kid that pulled the trigger this weekend, I wouldn't be shocked by that. I think that's absolutely within the possible outcomes for him on the weekend. So, again, really solid, steady defensive tackle, not as flashy as some other guys, but they're, part of me now, and again, it's that same thing that, parents fall into. Like, every quarterback that's 6 foot and 190 pounds is going to be Baker Mayfield. That's not the way it works. But with Taj, I'm like, I feel like I say the same things about Taj that I said about Jaden Jackson. And it scares me a little bit that, I'm really, really missing the boat on Taj Overton. But just like Jaden, I like Taj. I just think he's one of those guys that's going to be like a 3-year guy that may start for a couple, definitely in the rotation. I see him as a very, maybe not the highest of ceilings, but a very high floor.
And how big is it, Josh, that he's in the in-state kid? Being a guy from Oklahoma, that's obviously been an emphasis for this coaching staff.
Well, guys, you go back and look through it. Oklahoma hasn't had a ton of success at Owasso. That's not been a place. People talk about Booker T and some other places. Oklahoma's tried at Owasso several times and has not usually found a lot of success. Going back to, Josh Proctor was one of the really heartbreaking ones there for the Rams about, almost 10 years ago now. But
10 years?
I guess it was.
Are we getting that old?
2018?
Yeah.
2018.
It's getting close.
So eight classes ago.
That's crazy.
Crazy. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So it would be a nice win for Oklahoma to get that. And again, guys, when you talk about, and I'm an Oklahoma City guy, it pains me a little bit to say this, but when you talk about premier frontline guys, there just seems to be more of them sometimes in Tulsa with the Jinxes and the Wassos and the Unions.
Sure.
So you need to have those relationships. You need to be strong up there. And I think Oklahoma led a lot. I still think Brandon Hall deserves a lot of credit for that. He's done a good job being an in-state guy himself. But there's a lot of guys. Obviously, Todd Bates here has kind of locked in with Taj Overton for over a year now, and I think that's been a a tough hill for any other program to really get over.
Certainly something to keep an eye on going into this weekend. Speaking of schools that Oklahoma hasn't had a whole lot of success at, how about Duncanville? Zach Turner coming up this weekend, the running back out of Duncanville High School, one of the premier programs in the state of Texas as well as the country. 6'2", 200. Any chance that Oklahoma can make waves? I know that Miami's been a school maybe to watch here for the services of Zach Turner.
Yeah, guy that Oklahoma's kind of identified as, like, originally he was seen as a tight end for Oklahoma, and it was kind of that flex role. And then I think as Nagy and his staff came in, they were like, we're going to make this guy a wide receiver, and he's going to be a nightmare because he's so damn big. So I think that's kind of, again, like when you talk about Clay, Dandridge, like you go through the list, Oklahoma is definitely, whatever else they may be at wide receiver in 26, they're going to be bigger. Like there's going to be some big bodies out there. So I think Zach Turner is really interesting, guys, because it's funny how the situation at Duncanville has kind of revolved a couple of times. There's been a couple of 180s. So early on, Oklahoma was very much involved with Zach Turner, and Zach Turner kind of got KJ Ford to take a look. Mm-hmm. And then as KJ Ford became a bigger and bigger focus for Oklahoma, Zach Turner and OU kind of cooled because, like I said, I think he was seen as a tight end, and OU kind of said, I don't know if he's going to be a tight end. I don't know if he'll really fit that because he's 6'2" and a half and 205, 210. It was going to be a lot of work for him to get into that kind of role. But again, once it changed, then Zach Turner kind of becomes the guy again, and Oklahoma's kind of playing catch up a little bit with KJ Ford. So, and I actually, for Crimson Corner members, we'll have a little bit on KJ Ford maybe coming out of the weekend. So, just kind of keep an eye on that. USC was where he was supposed to go this weekend. That trip got changed. He's now going to Ohio State. We'll watch what that all means. I think that's going to be kind of an interesting thing to follow coming out of the summer when maybe there's not a lot of 2026 targets that still remain.
Josh, who has been Zachary Turner's main recruiter, or has it been kind of by committee?
I believe it's been Emmett Jones. That's very – I mean, Zach doesn't say a ton. He's kind of a quiet guy. But being at Duncanville and knowing the relationship that Emmett Jones has with Reginald Samples and the whole staff there at Duncanville, I mean, those are not guys like he knows from recruiting. Those are guys he's worked with for 20 years. Like, he knows that staff very well. So I would be shocked if it's not Emmett. But again, I will say some of his recruitment has been led by Nagy and his staff. Like, they really like him. They see him as a guy who fits. And not just, again, I don't want that to be like a divisive thing. Like, Emmett Jones likes him a lot too. It's not one or the other, but I'm just saying this is one of those guys that is kind of earmarked as this guy could really make sense within the model we're trying to build. So I think everybody's high on him. I agree with Eddie completely that Miami is the school to beat. I know from talking to some folks down there, it sounds like they're very confident, but they know Oklahoma's close. They know about the relationship Emmett Jones has. Like, they're scared enough to be keeping an eye on it. But I definitely think if you're coming into this weekend, you're betting on Miami for Zach Turner.
Josh, during your spring tour, you stopped by Bixby High School. You talked to Braden Presley. You can see that interview on the SoonerScoop.com editorial page. I walked out of watching that interview and thinking, okay, maybe OU has an out. It's a long shot, but maybe they do have a chance to get an Oklahoma State legacy. Obviously, both of his brothers playing at Oklahoma State. I think it's Braden that's now over at or Braden's coming in. Forget the other. I always get the Presleys mixed up. Either way,
Braylon.
I was thinking of Braylon.
Uh-huh.
God bless it. I had a couple beers last night.
Give me
a break. Well, no, I'm a little hungover. We'll be honest about it. But Braden Presley's coming in for an official visit. Any chance there for Oklahoma? Maybe you make an impression on somebody and you really start making him think about some things, or is this just a trip that he's coming down to kind of see what Oklahoma's all about?
I absolutely think there's a chance here. Like, he talks a lot about his, like how much he likes Brandon Hall, how much he likes Jay Valai. And I would think if there's any corner in this class, and again, if that's what OU deems to recruit him as, I think he's a little bit of a, we want you here and then we'll figure out where you're going to play. I don't think OU's dead set on anything. But if there was a guy who I felt like this guy could be Jay Valai 10 years from now, it's Braden Presley. Like, they have that same engaging, very nice personality, but at the same time, you can tell like they are highly motivated people, like that are like, you don't do what Braden's done at Bixby and not be a guy who believes in work. Lauren Montgomery would never accept that. So I think they're a good fit from a personality standpoint. I think Braden was honest with me in that interview you mentioned, Eddie, where he talked about wanting to play corner. Sure. I think that's an answer he's going to want. Like, do I at least get the chance to start at corner? Like, for people that don't know what I mean, I just mean he shows up at campus and he's going to work at corner, and then they'll sort out what it's going to be. I think he just doesn't want to be relegated to safety. Like, you got to be safety. We're not going to even be open to it. So, and I think that's something Oklahoma is absolutely allowing for. But what's interesting is with the commitment of Derek Johnson a couple weeks ago, what does that do? Because I've kind of always been working under the impression of one corner, but realizing that Oklahoma took Derek Johnson, I thought was very close to landing Danny Odom coming out of that weekend. You wonder a little bit, like, it's too possible if it's the right guys, and is Braden Presley one of those guys? So I honestly, I think he is. So there's a lot kind of up in the air with his recruitment, but again, with his flexibility, he gives OU some flexibility.
Oklahoma did lose an offensive line commitment on Monday, I believe. Was it Monday or Sunday? It seems like all these days running together
Monday.
Early in the week. How about
Monday.
that? Mm-hmm. Will Conroy, he flips his commitment to North Carolina. Oklahoma does have an offensive lineman coming in this weekend on the interior, 6'2", 330 out of Houston, Texas, Pasadena Memorial High School, Devin Robinson. This is a guy that Oklahoma fans should maybe keep an eye on going forward.
I think this is a name OU fans should probably etch down pretty solidly. Basically, I talk all the time about tells and things that tell you things. I don't think you need me and all, the years I've done this to tell you that basically the second a guy gets an offer, he sets up an official visit for the last possible visit weekend, that's a good sign. Like that is a pretty clear indicator of where a guy's at and what he's thinking. And I've seen nothing, in the last month, really, since he set that visit up to change my thinking on that. I think, he continues to like Bill Bedenbaugh. And this is not a kid that that is unfamiliar with Oklahoma. He camped up there last summer. We saw him a little bit work out at camp, and was a guy that was impressive. Like, I remember coming away liking him and thinking, okay, he's got to change his body up a little bit. Maybe there's a few guys. Because that's when, OU was so involved with Toa Katoa and some of these other guys that we knew. I think he came on, had a really good junior year, and OU kind of revisited him and just said, yeah, this is a guy we can absolutely make work for us.
Josh, is he a guard, center? Where do you see him maybe fitting in?
I think he's a guard. I wouldn't rule out center, but I don't like – when I think of the center types that Bill usually likes, this is not usually that body type. Like, it's usually either kind of a longer, leaner guy or like a 280-pound guy that is just nasty, and like that like he kind of has Bill has types, and I don't think he fits that type all that well, but he fits in the he kind of reminds me of Tyrese Robinson. Like, I see some of that in his game, and so I could see him being that kind of guy. And like Tyrese, really good athlete. Like, you see like the height and weight, and you might think, oh, does he move that well? He moves really well. Like, that's not a problem for him. And once he gets with Jerry Schmidt, leans out a little bit and kind of changes his body, the makeup a little bit. I think he could be one of those guys that if Oklahoma should land him, you could look back in a few years and say that was a really good eval by the staff. I think they really got somebody there.
Last but not least, the third commitment coming in this weekend of the 13 that are coming in for their official visits. Nico Jandro coming in. His commitment a couple weeks ago, about a month ago, was kind of a little bit maybe of a surprise, bringing along brother Bowe Bentley. We've talked about him on the Unofficial 40 as well as a couple of the last recruiting reports. Certainly somebody, when you're talking about a linebacker, Nate Dreiling and company, extremely high on, and it doesn't sound like they're the only ones that are high on him.
Yeah, I've referenced it several times that I know some staffs that, have been and are involved in that recruitment, and they are very high on Bowe Bentley. They think he is absolutely outstanding and really kind of undervalued nationally. But yeah, with Bowe and Nico, again, almost the second Nico put in his commitment, I put one in with Bowe. We've talked about this over and over again. Twins, brothers, just in general, they very rarely separate. Like, that's not usually the way it goes. There are examples. I know people will yell one or another at me as they watch this on YouTube, but that's not usually the way it plays out. And I think Oklahoma's done an outstanding job with Bowe. And I honestly, I think it comes down to OU Texas for Bowe. And I just struggle to believe the two brothers are going to be playing against each other in the Cotton Bowl. That's a holy war that no house deserves. And so, I think they're just going to skip that part.
Josh, 13 official visitors coming in this weekend, possibly. Sounds like Bowe Bentley expected to be here. What would you set the over-under on guys that end up in this class?
Overall, that's a good one. Okay, so there's 3 commitments already. Then again, like I said, I've got predictions already in for Bo Jandro and Trace Rudd. So then you'd hit to 5. Obviously, Devin Robinson and Taj Overton, I feel really strongly there. So, guys, that's 7, and I haven't even gotten to Jake Krull, who, again, I think Oklahoma's in really good shape for. So I would set the over-under at 8. I think is very realistic, and I would probably take the over because they're not going to get everybody else, but they're going to get 1 or 2 of these other guys that we've been talking about.
And shout out Trace Rudd. I think he watches, so shout out the kicker that's coming in out of Missouri there. So that will be interesting. Obviously, Trace Rudd too. He's very highly ranked coming in.
Yeah, and again, and I love that he's the kicker willing to have a little bit of fun because for those that missed it, he tweeted out me talking on the unofficial 40. I don't know anything about kicking. I'm told he's good. That's enough for me. Like that, and that's it. But what I will say, it was the underrated part. The kid picked Beastie Boys Sure Shot for his music, and I'm like, that's beautiful. Like, as a music guy and a Beastie Boys fan, I couldn't have loved that choice more for a kicker.
No doubt. All right, that's going to do it. That's a little bit of a preview coming up for the weekend. Obviously, the Jaden O'Neal news on Thursday night. Not so much of a surprise to a lot of us. I think it was more of a, okay, finally, let's get these dominoes rolling here a little bit or falling in place for Oklahoma. And if Bowe Bentley shows up in Norman, as we've reported and as expected, it'd be good news for Oklahoma. Maybe this thing becomes a little bit bigger than it already is going into the weekend. All right, it's going to be a long 2 days until Game 7 coming up in Oklahoma City on Sunday night. Looking forward to George Stoya. That's a little offensive to 2 Catholics sitting here, Josh, by the way. But
I'll take whatever I can get right now.
We look forward to Kerry Murdoch taking us to the game on Sunday night.
That's the only way to right this ship.
That's the only way. All right, that's going to do it. Keep up to date on SoonerScoop.com throughout the weekend. Obviously, we'll be reporting if Bowe Bentley actually does make it to campus, as well as everything else from the 13 official visitors coming into Norman this weekend. For George and Josh, I'm Eddie. We'll see you back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.